The Hub is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome to The Hub. I'm Nestor Lecanto, and joining us for this week's show is Senator Chris Duenas. We're going to talk a little bit about his bill, and Simon Sanchez, of course, a longtime member of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. I got it right this time, Si.
You did. You always get it right.
All right. So, Senator Duenas, you had held a press conference this week, and you explained what your bill was about. It's a rather complex measure. There's a lot of competing interests. I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of be able to explain it. So, if you could, just lay it out on the table what it is your bill is attempting to accomplish.
Thanks, Nestor. And I think it's complex in the beginning, but it has a simple solution. Of course, there are some technical parameters to it, but maybe I'll retell the story. What exists right now on Guam is a situation whereby landowners can parcel their property, particularly when they're going to give it as an inheritance to their children or even an estate. Under really several different ways. But one way is called a parental subdivision. In a parental subdivision, lot sizes are quite a bit, and density of property is quite a bit smaller than in a typical subdivision, or what individuals would typically do for a manageable and a decent sized lot for building a single family dwelling. The two classes that really right now are kind of in conflict or not parity is under a parental subdivision, when family members, father and mother, father, whoever is going to execute the deed, who has the power and the authority and the ownership to do that. Under a parental subdivision, they can do it, and they can have lot sizes just smaller and under the size of a quarter acre, and several different lots per acre, more than a standard subdivision. The thing is that a lot of times there also becomes the same situation under what's called a decedent subdivision, and that's done through the probate process, and that's done when the courts make the distribution. A lot of times you have many heirs, to a certain parcels of property, and so when the court does that, they'll do that in a fair distribution, of course, of equal sized lots. A lot of times those lots will be similar to or the same size as parental subdivision, and probably was intended that way sometimes when the family goes into probate. Here's where the problem lies. The same two individuals can't avail themselves of the same opportunities when it goes to the regulatory process when they want to build a single family home. If you are in a parental subdivision and you have a lot under 1/4 acre, you are able to still build by using a septic system. If you receive the same property under a distribution and you are a decedent estate and you went and applied to build a single family dwelling, you will be denied if there's no sewer system available because of the fact that you won't meet the lot size requirement, and now you're different under a decedent subdivision than you are in a parental subdivision. This is really kind of where the law is either silent, or as far as EPA and Waterworks is concerned, it's clear that a decedent property is not availed of the same opportunity as a parental subdivision. This has caused issues with families who have gone in and tried to construct single family dwelling homes, and it's much to the surprise of a lot of families. And obviously, I think most of us can agree, I don't think the government's intending to, and nobody wants to go out there and really penalize families. It's more because right now, of course, EPA and Waterworks has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the aquifer, and that's completely understandable. Here's where the solution comes in, and hopefully Simon will add to this, and we'll have a really, very favorable discussion on the fact that there is modern technology now, and I've supplied you with a brochure on one of the more common used one in our region. It is the FujiClean system. I want to full disclosure, I don't endorse the system. I have no financial interest in any system, particularly this one. The reason why this is being used is a family, the Damian family, and David Damian and his father and his wife over a decade ago, was dealing with this issue and decided to be proactive. In 2008, they picked up the mantle of starting to see alternatives, him being a realtor and looking for opportunities to see if we can move on to a technology where we're waiting for wastewater management to come in, sewer to come in some of these subdivisions. They went and they researched and they actually purchased this system. This system has been on their property now for 13 years. The late Dr. Rouse was working with their family along with Weary and other individuals. EPA was very aware, and results have already been provided, of the technology and how it's been managed with this particular one system. And other senators have been made apprised from this over the years, as well as contractors and others. So we seem to be getting there now with accepting that if we're going to go and allow for this type of construction and maybe bring parity to the decedents, but also because outside of just over the northern aquifer, this is going to benefit a lot of families, and Simon will talk to that we now move to this as a temporary fix as Guam Water Works and the government continues to, make its way to provide adequate infrastructure systems further out into subdivisions, economies of scale where it makes sense. But in the meantime, let's see if we can't adopt this technology and mandate it, and therefore put in a layer of protection that will mitigate the issue of potentially damaging the aquifer.
Okay, you've laid out the table. I want to we need to take a break, but when we come back, I want to get Simon's take on it, because I think what the biggest concern, of course, and you mentioned it, is are we going to allow this sort of technology over the Northern Lens Aquifer, which is critical to everything our island does, because it's our main
and Simon's the pro
drinking
for
water source. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of our very interesting discussion right after this. All right, we're back. Welcome back to the Hub. I'm joined by Senator Chris Duenas and CCU member Simon Sanchez. Before the break, the senator was kind enough to kind of lay out what his bill would do and all of the complex issues that are involved. But as he said, it's complex, might be in the beginning, but there's a simple solution to it. I think in my reading of the information, I think one of the biggest concerns, and there will be a robust discussion of this, is over the northern, allowing this over the northern water lens. What's your take on this?
So we actually began this discussion with Senator Biscoe Lee about 3 years ago, and it was an excellent discussion involving the real estate community, particularly John Duenas, who's also an engineer, right, and his wife Liz, and they're great representatives of the real estate community. And then GWA, Miguel Berdallo, and myself were kind of called together by Senator Biscoe Lee, but she did it late in her term, and we couldn't get the bill out. And thankfully, Senator Duenas has picked the ball up, because where there's agreement is this new technology will lower the cost of housing for everybody, particularly those that are nowhere near an existing sewer line, because utilities don't just lay infrastructure all over the island and say, I hope someone hooks up to it, because someone's got to pay for that infrastructure. So development pulls infrastructure towards it, right? So now a family, whether it's down south, not over the aquifer, or up north where the aquifer exists, and they say, now we want to develop our property. And in the spirit of the two laws the senator mentioned, where the familial subdivisions, the decedent subdivisions, the parental subdivisions are a little unique in that they allow for a little more development per acre. I think the minimum lot sizes are 7,200 square feet versus 1,000 square feet. So if you're not a parental or decedent subdivision, it's 4 houses an acre. If you are a parental or decedent subdivision, you can get 5 or 6 units per acre. So this is the issue of the density of development. And if you're not over the aquifer, what's great about this bill is there's this newer technology that would allow homeowners who are not near a sewer line to build their houses, and instead of the old septic tanks, which is how we did it since World War II, but these are 40, 50, 60 years later, we see they leak, and when they leak over the aquifer, that's not good. This new technology that the senator's bill would authorize, there is unanimity, as far as I'm aware, from GIPA, Guam EPA, and GWA, that we should approve this technology. So that, to me, is the easy part. And thanks to Senator Duenas, we now have a chance to bring this technology to bear to help people develop their houses at a lower cost if they're not near a sewer line. So that's the good part. The only concern that's emerging, though, is with the parental subdivisions that allow 5 or 6 units to be developed per acre. If you're not over the aquifer, this bill is great. Build your house, use this technology. The law requires GIPA to authorize these technologies. So that's really what his law starts to do. Okay? GIPA, you have now one more arrow in your quiver. You can approve, this technology is approved. The only question GIPA and GWA is asking, okay, when we get to development over the aquifer and you're allowing for more dense development with parental or decedent subdivisions, instead of 4 per acre, 5 to 6 per acre, do we create a risk over the aquifer that none of us want? The real estate community doesn't want to risk the aquifer. GIPA doesn't want to risk the aquifer. GWA doesn't risk the aquifer. Senator Duenas and all the senators, no one wants to do that. Right. So we're sort of almost there where we're saying, okay, approve the technology, but we need to have a healthy discussion over when it comes to development over the aquifer. First off, existing law allows for these 5 to 6 units per acre to be developed under the decedent or parental subdivision. So yesterday I presented initial testimony from Captain Bearden of GIPA and Miguel Bradallo of GWA, which just raised the concern that when you put that much more dense development over the aquifer, are we creating undue risk? Because as good as this technology is, it's newer, and yes, it's proven in the region, as Senator Duenas pointed out yesterday, but it's over the next 10, 20, 30 years that we create a situation where we're seeing now with septic tanks that were built after World War II or houses built in the 60s and 70s, now those septic tanks are corroding and leaching into the ground, and if they get into the aquifer, GIPA and GWA and WERI, they study, this is part of the things they do, is they're seeing an increase in nitrates in the aquifer, and that's not a good thing. And if we've been to Saipan and the CNMI and our friends up north, we realize what happens when you bust your aquifer and you have saltwater intrusion, and no matter how well you treat it, it's still salty, right? And we don't want to do that to the aquifer, which supports 80% of the people in Guam. So what we need to work through, and the bill gives us this opportunity to work through this, is to sit down with the real estate community and the WERI and GWA and GIPA and say, okay, if this is over the aquifer, are we comfortable with allowing 5 or 6 units per acre versus only 4? Because housing's an issue, right? And the more houses per acre would be a good thing. And the cost to hook up to a sewer is expensive. This is less expensive. So this is a solution for getting more affordable housing, but no one wants to risk hurting the aquifer. So that's where I think more of the discussion needs to occur, and thanks to Senator Duenas' bill, we have an opportunity to have this discussion. It's resurrecting a discussion that started 3 years ago. Senator Duenas is aware of all the key players, and I think between the real estate community, GWA, and WERI and GIPA, our goal is to find common ground, and because one challenge is to say it's acceptable technology for 4 units per acre, but it's not for 5 to 6 units per acre when existing law allows for 5 to 6 units. That's a tension in the law that we got to think about, because I can see both sides of the argument. Well, it's already allowed to have 5 or 6, and this technology is better than the traditional septic. Can we marry the two? But allowing 5 to 6 units, even with this new technology over the aquifer, are you creating a risk that we should be concerned about, and to what level? And so I think my hope is we can bring the parties back together now that the senator has at least introduced the bill. He's going to have, it was great that he had a little work session yesterday, and then hopefully a public hearing soon, because I think it'll galvanize these parties to say, okay, what do we want to do? We want to lower the cost of housing. We want to protect the aquifer. We have a technology that should be approved. I think that's already agreed to. But if you're developing over the aquifer and you're allowed 5 to 6 units per acre, even with this new technology, should we, shouldn't we, how do we think about it? And I think that's the only issue that to me is outstanding amongst the parties.
Yeah, and Senator, that seems to be what it boils down
Sure.
to. We have two very important needs, the need to address affordable housing and, how are, folks who had property, deeded to them going to develop and build their single family homes, their American dream, but also protecting, what might be considered our most precious resource, our water resource, at all costs. So how do we come to some kind of compromise or solution to that?
So it's interesting, after yesterday's initial launch of this, and I did it on purpose in a format to where we would invite the stakeholders who have already been working on this for years together and do a press conference so that we can start airing out this issue and getting the concerns on the table. And already, there's commitment to meetings with all the stakeholders, emails going around. But what was interesting was one of my main witnesses, Mr. Santos, who has property up in Chalampago, who, brought this to light to me through other meetings and hearings that I had. It's great with his situation because I didn't even know really what his parcels were. But each of his parcels on the 11 in Chalampago and the 2 in Dedido, the 2 in Dedido are slightly over a quarter. The other 11 are actually a third of an acre. So he's really even larger than what parental subdivision is calling for up in Chalampago. I think there's many people who fall into this category, and what we talked about was maybe there will be some refining in definitions, and even if we, I think we should accept that possibly we're going to definitely have to start being from the cautious position of the density issue. But even as we study this going forward, people are smart when they build their houses, right? If you already know there's a potential that you could partition your property down the line, even people like myself with a half acre when I built my first house, now I built to the back corner because I'm in Sinhonia, just in back of Route 4 and off of me. Someday the sewer might come in. So I'm going to make sure that I take the whatever setbacks are required and put that house right in the corner, so that in the event, when maybe my son takes over the house and the sewer is in, he can build another house for his son, because when sewer is there, he can cut that in half again.
Yes, yep.
Maybe now, even with this system, it can be done earlier. So the thing is that I do agree with Simon, and I agree with the fact that let's put everything on the table. But I think definitely the cautious approach. And then let me give you a snapshot of today, so that people go and understand actually what's currently the situation. The latest that I've received from Permit Center is there's about 80 requests right now under parental subdivision for individuals. And, of course, the market's really tight right now because interest rates are high and construction's high. But there's still 80 people that want to build a house right now in a parental subdivision. That's pretty significant. There are I believe close to 60 that, even though they're under decedent in the states, are currently under application, and probably because they're going to realize eventually that they may not be able to avail or can't avail of that, and they'll have to increase, if they can, their density in order to be able to realize that construction, and with a septic system. So roughly 150 families right now, that are currently, underway seeking to do this in over the aquifer and in low density, applications. Maybe we might end up, Simon, as setting a number in the beginning, say maybe we roll out to, 1,000 and study, as how it goes forward. I'm sure market forces, but we're going to have the conversation, but it's very compelling right now, the argument from CCU and from GWA and from EPA that it's caution is going to be the way to go in terms of what the density that's going to be adopted.
All right, we got to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up the show and see what the way forward will be. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So we got about 4.5 minutes left, so I want to get to you quickly to get your final thoughts on this. Simon, what's the CCU and GWA's position going forward?
Well, first off, the CCU hasn't taken a formal position. I've been the individual involved with the discussion and with Miguel. And so I'm, really speaking on my behalf, but I'm aware of the issues that have been raised. I think the easy part is the technology is acceptable to all the parties, okay? And the only debate is not that there be no development over the aquifer. The concern was you can have right now 4 units per acre under the most traditional housing subdivisions, but the special subdivisions for parental antecedents allow 5 or 6 units, and that's where the density of development per acre over the aquifer has raised the concerns. So our hope is that we can bring the parties together and talk through that. It's not the technology, because we need this bill at least to allow the technology, and perhaps, as the senator suggested, we can try to say at a minimum you can do 4, right? And do we say allow 5? I think that's sort of the art of the legislative process, right? Is it worth trying a compromise? Because we're not saying no development over the aquifer. We're just saying don't. Some parties are saying just don't do more than 4, which is already allowed by law. But the law also allows for 5 or 6 units to be developed for certain types of subdivision. And so if they use this technology, how do you say you can do 5 or 6 units, but you got to hook to a sewer line? But if you don't do 5 or 6 units, you can use that technology, which is so much cheaper, right? And GWA someday will follow where development is when it's cost effective to run sewer lines out there. But families need to make decisions now, right, for their kids and their needs now. So we can appreciate that we're trying to find the balancing act necessary. The senator has given us an opportunity to revisit that issue, and I think there's at least some ability to go forward with some level of development over the aquifer using this new technology, and then whether we allow for the full 5 or 6, that's a kind of a debate which ultimately will end in the legislature.
Right.
What they're willing to tolerate, they're going to listen to the different points of view, and then they'll make a call. And maybe it's something where you start with a certain level of permission of development and density, and then watch it, and then maybe you amend the law over time, or you can say, no, 5 or 6 is good, and this new technology is good. That's above my pay scale. That's over.
All right, and we'll finish it up with the Senator Duenas. So you've laid it out. Your bill's out there. What are the next steps forward?
Nestor, we're going to keep talking, and we're going to hope that the committee chair will be attentive and get a public hearing quite soon. But in the meantime, I'm excited because the parties are already discussing this issue. They're going to have a couple more sit-downs. I've been invited to the next board meeting at EPA. Captain Bearden and the folks who have the duty and the awesome responsibility of protecting our environment and our aquifer have laid out what is their position. You, of course, real estate, individuals and others who are wanting highest and best use of their property are going to want the best outcome for themselves. I really believe there's a middle here. And I really believe right now going forward, what I really appreciate is Simon and the rest of the utility agencies. They're coming to the table because they're going to want to study this. They're going to want to follow through to see as this growth goes forward. Like I said, maybe we cap at some point and get information and find out what's going on. And as we see it going forward, and as we see these systems installed, maintained, and operational, maybe our community then will say, okay, we're ready to go to the next step. But I know there's a lot of senators who are paying attention to this too. I had potential co-sponsors, but they were doing their due diligence, Simon and Senator, my friend, and they were getting their lead and their information that the density in this bill is not what's currently accepted by the regulatory agencies. And so they said, Chris, we'll discuss it with you on the floor, and maybe we'll be able to jump on board if we're comfortable with the environmental protection.
All right. We'll be
so
following.
everybody's talking, Nestor. That's the good part.
I think that was your intent, and credit to you. All right. We'll be following it as well. I'm Nestor Licanto. This is Senator Chris Duenas, the sponsor of the bill, and our good friend Simon Sanchez from the CCU. I'm Nestor Licanto. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week on The Hub.